Hello?
Mic check, mic check. Hello everyone. We have 10 minutes before the appointed time. Get ready for MathCon 2023 Revelare, where the magic of Mathematica meets the incredible world of numbers.
Dear equationists, we encourage you to fill out the spaces in front or beside you to give spaces for the other equationists waiting to enter the magical world of Revelare. To those at the back, you guys can sit in front. For those coming in, you guys can settle down on the stairs or you guys can sit at the back. Or if you see any empty spaces, you guys can fill that up.
Remove? Can you remove? Can you remove?
Everyone, kindly settle down.
Start. One more time now, settle down.
Dear equationists, we kindly ask you to please settle down. If there are no empty spaces, you guys can sit on the stairs or stand at the back.
Fran said you just remove stuff with the curve fillers. I think we should remove this now. So we have to speed up. Right after this, you go.
Again, for those coming in, if there are no more spaces, you guys can sit on the stairs or stand at the back. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this year's MathCon 2023 Revelare, where we celebrate the union between mathematics and magic. I am your guide, Rainiel.
And I am your map keeper, Joseph. This year's main agenda is for you, young equationists, to venture into the Revelare labyrinth and explore the infinite possibilities of Mathematica. Onward into the heart of the labyrinth's enigma.
However, before we begin, we would first beseech everyone to comply with this gathering's rules. We request our participants to embrace the essence of our mystical gathering. Kindly keep distractions at bay and let your devices rest in muted slumber and refrain from breaking silence as the tale unfolds.
To all who partake in this magical journey, please accomplish an evaluation form at the end as well. This act not only records your presence in our shared adventure, but also aids in our effort to have no participant left behind.
To formally begin this gathering, let us first observe the singing of the national anthem. Please rise and let us all sing before we begin our time together.
Ng silanganan, harap ng puso, sa titig mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyang sa simula, sa langit mong mukha ay nilagang tula, tawid sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kisap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagnininig. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan ba may di magdidilim. Lupa ng harangan, walhati pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Ang kaya nga ba ay nanatay ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
May we also invite Mr. Francis Macaraig, who shall guide us in a moment of reflection, reminding us of the presence of the Lord Almighty.
I am inviting everyone to please do the sign of your faith. Heavenly Father, we thank you for giving us this day the gift of life, family, friends, educators, speakers, staff, and the entirety of the Ateneo community. We give you thanks for gathering us in your holy presence to celebrate the field of mathematics in the company of one another. We ask you, Lord, to shower this event with your grace, that it may lead to its success. May today's MathCon 2023 Revelare serve as a reminder to each and every one of us present here today of the prevalence and importance of mathematics. Bless our speakers, that they may impart stimulating mathematics knowledge to our beloved audience, especially our freshmen taking Math 10. The team behind this event, that the efforts they have poured into it be all the more worthwhile. Our students, that they may have within themselves an open mind, ready to be curious about the world they are situated in, and the mathematics that revolves around them. All these we ask in your most holy name. Amen.
You may now take your seats. And now, allow us to usher forth our esteemed Dr. Romina Anyap to open the gates of the Revelare Labyrinth and lead us into figuring out Mathematica's limitless potential. Please give a round of applause to Dr. Yap.
Hello, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome each and every one of you today to MathCon 2023 Revelare. MathCon, if you guys don't know it yet, it's a regular activity with Ateneo Math Society, or AMS, and there's a lot of them around you. Through the talks and exhibits that they would feature, AMS aims to bring the Ateneo community to more appreciate and see how mathematics permeates our world and how it serves us in many different ways. Hence, MathCon has always been a perfect complement to the objectives of the core mathematics subject, Math 10, or Math in the Modern World. But I believe that it is the first time that MathCon is actually being implemented purposefully to fit the schedule of Math 10. As a long-time Math 10 teacher, I think I speak not only for myself, but also for my fellow faculty. This has been a long overdue. We are excited about this collaboration, and we thank the organizers from our side, led by Dr. Jude Buot, and then from the AMS side, many people, Rafa, Trisha, Francis, Jello, Caitlin Yapan, and many others. Thank you for making this happen. Now, when we hear teachers, they'll talk about the wonders, beauty, and significance of mathematics in the world. I think that you, our students, sometimes can help but be skeptical and remain unconvinced. It is, after all, part of our job to sell mathematics to you. So we very much welcome an event like this, where other individuals outside of your regular math classrooms can tell you about their own experience or their own story with mathematics. And then perhaps, finally, you can say and share with more conviction that mathematics is indeed worth knowing and worth doing. So we are very grateful to Mark Loyola, Josh Uiheng, Lionel Tangangco, and David Coawungco, who have taken time to be with us today to share how mathematics has illuminated their work, or in relation to your recent Math 10 lessons, how mathematics has made the invisible things visible. In the next 3 hours, expect Revelare. Without further ado, let us now learn more about our speakers and listen as they talk about their work and the remarkable value of mathematics. Thank you for joining us today and enjoy the talks.
Thank you, Dr. Yap, for that wonderful introduction. The allure of MathCon seems to magnify with each passing year. Don't you think so, Guy Drino?
Indeed, it is also the first time that we return on-site after a long period of hibernation. In fact, it has been so long that the passage of time has already cast a veil over my memory. Could you remind us more about the Revelare Labyrinth, Mapkeeper Joseph?
Well, certainly. In fact, many starry-eyed equationists gather here yearly to learn about Mathematica, the ancient dark magic that lingers invisibly in this world. Hence, as authorities of magic, we, the Matrix Magi, organize an annual event to bring together practitioners and beginners alike. Beware, however, because when it comes to the Revelare Labyrinth, it is always easier to enter than to exit.
This unknown would be challenging to many. We know that you are unsure of how to navigate the maze, and it is hard to move from your seats because of the shadowy entrances of the maze are too daunting. You are afraid of getting nowhere once you start traversing the maze.
However, the longer you stay stuck in the labyrinth, the more you will be too fearful of taking the next step. The labyrinth may challenge us, test our limits, and steer our deepest fears. But remember this, within every shadow, there lies a spark of enlightenment. And within every challenge, an opportunity to conquer. Remember, all is not as it seems, especially with magic practitioners.
Keep an eye on the four sorcerers who hold keys to the secret of the Revelare Labyrinth, for they would complete your fundamentals. They, who possess the knowledge of the underlying mechanisms of the labyrinth, would aid you in solving the maze. May you also turn to our pigeonhole link below for our Q&A later. To our dear equationists, we ask you to enter the secret passcode that will be shown on the screen later into our channels and tag them as either topic 1 or topic 2.
All right. In the pursuit of unraveling the enigmas that shroud the realm, we yield the stage to the esteemed Dr. Lester Howe to introduce to us our first fundamental speaker.
Hello, everyone. Allow me to introduce our first speaker today. Dr. Mark L. Loyola is a true blue Athenian, having graduated with a bachelor's, Master of Science, and Doctor of Philosophy in Mathematics degrees in Ateneo. Currently Associate Professor in the Department of Mathematics, his research interests include algebra and discrete geometry and mathematical crystallography. Let us all welcome, with a warm round of applause, Dr. Mark Loyola.
Good afternoon, everyone, and
Good afternoon,
thank you
everyone.
to the organizers for. Hindi echo ba? Okay. So again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me to give this talk entitled "Efficiency Through Symmetry." For this 25-minute talk, I have three main objectives. I subdivided the talk into three parts, each fulfilling an objective. Echo ba? Sorry, may echo ba? Okay. So first, I'm going to briefly recall what symmetry from the perspective of geometry means. This will simply be a recall for those who already discussed symmetry in their Math 10 class. Next, I will illustrate through some examples how symmetry allows an object, either living or inanimate, to execute a function or an aspect of it efficiently. Finally, I'm going to describe how a virus, a nanometer-sized organism, employs symmetry during the vital process of self-assembly in its life cycle. So what exactly is symmetry from the geometric point of view? To understand symmetry, first we need to talk about isometries. Essentially, an isometry is a function that sends a point in space to another point in space in such a way that distance is preserved. For example, if the space is a plane, r squared, then an isometry will send a point P in the plane to a point T of P in the same plane such that if the distance of the points P and Q is equal to D units, then the distance between T of P and T of Q must also be equal to D. Now, there are 5 types of isometries of the plane. We describe them by their effect on an object lying on the plane. So here we have Link from The Legend of Zelda, if you are familiar with the game, as our object. The first type of isometry is the identity isometry. The effect of it is to send each point to itself. In other words, after applying the identity, there is no movement involved at all. The next type is called translation. The effect is to displace the object and move it to a different location without changing its orientation. So here's how a translation will look like. So you move the object to a different location without changing the orientation of the object. The third type is called rotation. So a rotation rotates an object about a fixed point called the center at a specified angle. So here's Link rotating about a point 180 degrees counterclockwise. The fourth type is called reflection. Given a fixed line called the axis of reflection, a reflection takes an object to its mirror image with the axis as mirror line. Again, so here's the object, here's the mirror line, here's the mirror image of the object. So that's the effect of reflection. Now the last type is called glide reflection. It is essentially a combination of a reflection and a translation with direction parallel to the mirror line. So again, we first reflect and then we translate to get the effect of a glide reflection. Now that we know what an isometry means, we can now define a symmetry. Given an object, say this 2D virus figure, a symmetry is any isometry that sends the object to itself. Same location, same position, same orientation. For example, this 2D object contains the identity symmetry. For reflection symmetries with the following mirror lines. So 1, 2, the third mirror line, and the fourth mirror line. It also contains 3 rotation symmetries with angles 90 degrees, 180 degrees, and 270 degrees counterclockwise. Now that we have recalled what symmetry means, we can now dig deep into how one can take advantage of symmetry to perform in an efficient manner. So how does symmetry implies efficiency? Looking at this particular object, we observe that it has this repetitive quality to it. In fact, it really is just a small portion, which if we reflect about this mirror, will give us this quarter portion, which when we reflect once again, will give us half the entire object. Then after another reflection, we'll get the full object. Okay? So thus, we observe that the full object may be reconstructed from the very small portion of it by applying symmetries. Okay? That small portion, this small portion here that allows reconstruction is called a fundamental unit of the object. So again, given the fundamental unit, we are able to get the entire object by applying symmetries. So this particular observation leads us to a solution of this more general problem of storing an infinite amount of data if the available memory storage is very limited. For example, how do we store in memory the image of this particular tiling, which we assume covers the entire infinite plane? So the solution is to employ symmetry. We take full advantage of it. In the memory, we store only a fundamental unit and some of the symmetries of the data. This will allow us to generate the entire data by applying stored symmetries to a fundamental unit. For this particular tiling, this small triangle is a fundamental unit. If we apply a reflection and another reflection, followed by a sequence of translations, then eventually we'll be able to arrive at the full tiling. Again, starting with a small portion, we can apply a reflection, another reflection, then translations. In the end, we'll be able to get the entire tiling. And note that that is really an efficient way to store complex infinite data in a finite limited memory storage. Now, we also remark that as the number of symmetries of an object increases, the size of the fundamental unit decreases. Thus, the more symmetries it has, the more efficient it will be. Therefore, systems which are limited by size, memory, or other resources can maximize their function without utilizing a large amount of resources by employing symmetry. Now, we have already established earlier that symmetry allows an object or a system to maximize its function by taking full advantage of symmetry. We earlier used a tiling as an example. Now, let us move outside the realm of geometry and mathematics and look at why modern nature actually prefers symmetry and how it utilizes symmetry as a sort of law or rule in executing naturally occurring process. In a research article entitled "Symmetry and Simplicity Spontaneously Emerged from the Algorithmic Nature of Evolution," published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences on December 2021, which have been reported on in the New York Times article entitled "Life's Preference for Symmetry is Like a New Law of Nature," researchers ran computer simulations on protein structures and found out that out of around 13 million protein structures, only 5 have symmetries of a square. The rest have no regular shape, hence possess only the identity symmetry. Now, though this may be the case, taking into account evolutionary factors, the simulations return these 5 simple square structures 30% of the time. So imagine out of 13 million possibilities, these 5 protein structures with relatively high number of symmetries tend to appear most often. As the column puts it, this is rather like running into 5 particular people from the entire Tokyo, or in our case, Metro Manila population 30% of the time. So although we may think of randomness as the main law followed by nature, symmetric structures crop up far more often than pure randomness would allow. It seems that nature plays a biased game with a loaded die. And this confirms nature's preference for symmetry and simplicity. So, why does symmetry reign supreme? To quote the New York Times article, evolution tends towards symmetry because the instructions to produce symmetry are easier to embed. Remember the fundamental unit. In genetic code and follow. Remember, we apply only a small subset of stored symmetries to the fundamental unit in order to get the entire object. It also added, simple repeating patterns are easier to carry out. Okay, remember again, fundamental units are relatively simple and small when compared to the whole object. And therefore, they are harder to screw up. Okay, again, remember, symmetries give clear instructions for building an object or system from scratch. We simply translate, rotate, reflect, etc. The article further added, symmetry is maybe the most fundamental application of the adage, work smarter, not harder. Now, as a concrete illustration to the findings of the study, which I just mentioned, we take a look at how viruses replicate themselves effectively and efficiently by employing symmetry. So, first, what is a virus? A virus is a submicroscopic nanometer-sized pathogen or infectious agent that does not have the capability to replicate itself. It therefore hijacks a living cell and converts its mechanism into an assembly line for virus replication. Just imagine a thief going to a restaurant and asking the chef to cook for them. That's how nasty viruses are. Because a virus is rather small and simple when compared to the cell that it infects and takes over, it consists of a very short strand of genetic material which can either be DNA or RNA. Now, the genetic material of the virus is protected by a protein coat called the capsid, which also interacts with the host cell and delivers the viral genome. Okay? Now, this alien-looking model here, it models what we call a bacteriophage. Okay? It's a special type of virus that infects not humans or animals, but they infect bacteria. So, aside from the head of the virus, which contains here the genetic material that can correspond to either DNA or RNA, you also have your long tail fibers that it uses to attach itself to the host. Now, it turned out most viruses that infect human and animals, such as papillomavirus, rhinovirus, the virus that causes common colds, hepatitis B virus, and herpes virus, are in the shape of the solid icosahedron, or have capsids, the protective layer, whose component proteins are arranged following icosahedral symmetries. Here's an icosahedron. It's a solid containing 12 vertices. The white spheres here are the vertices of the icosahedron. Okay? And it has 30 edges. The edges connect the vertices of the icosahedron and 20 triangular faces. In total, an icosahedron has 120 symmetries. Half of them are rotations. Take note that because this one now is a 3D figure, a rotation will be with respect to a line or an axis. Okay? For this icosahedron, an axis of rotation will either connect two opposite vertices, two midpoints of opposite edges, or two centers of opposite triangular faces. Now, half of the rotations are reflections. Okay? There are 15 reflections for this particular figure. This time, a reflection will be with respect to a plane. Okay? So that will really be a mirror plane. Now, as a 3D object, it also has what we call an inversion. An inversion will send a point to a point opposite to it relative to the center of the icosahedron. So, a fundamental unit of the icosahedron is this triangular subsection of a face. Thus, with this small subsection, one can generate the entire solid. So imagine, after rotations, reflections, this particular portion will allow you to generate the entire solid. Now, if you open an icosahedral virus, we get what we call the net. The red, orange, and yellow portions of the net are the protein subunits of the capsid, which are arranged around the vertices, edges, or faces according to icosahedral symmetries. So, we now know that most viruses are icosahedral. But how does symmetry help a virus in its life cycle? How did viruses evolve and take an icosahedral structure? And out of all the shapes, why the icosahedron? To answer these questions, we look at how a virus replicates itself. As we shall see, symmetry is a crucial aspect in what we call the self-assembly of a virus. To understand self-assembly, let us first watch the following animated video explaining the life cycle of a virus.
Every cell in your body is a tiny factory.
Let me just, hindi naka-share yung audio. Ulit.
Constantly making proteins. Your genetic code Every cell in your body is a tiny factory, constantly making proteins. Your genetic code, or DNA, directs every activity. Protein-making machinery in the cell reads the cell's own DNA and makes sure the cell proteins go where they're needed. Viruses have their own genetic code, but they don't have the machinery to copy their DNA. So viruses need your cell's machinery to reproduce themselves. A virus starts this process by using the keys on its surface to gain entry. Like a Trojan horse, it enters the cell. The virus releases its own DNA into the unsuspecting cell and hijacks the protein-making machinery. Now, this vital cell function becomes an assembly line for new virus particles. No longer in service to your body, the cell now serves the virus, manufacturing thousands of new virus particles, which are released to enslave more cells, thousands and thousands more.
summarize what we have just watched, nakamute na siya. Nakamute siya simula. So, to summarize what we have just watched, here are the steps in the life cycle of a virus. Step number 1 and 2, a virus particle attaches itself to a host cell, and because it has a copy of the key that fits the lock of the cell, it is able to gain entry into the cell. Step number 3, the proteins on the capsid disassemble, thereby releasing the genetic material of the virus inside the cell. Step number 4, now that the DNA or RNA of the virus is just floating around the cell, together with other genetic materials, it gets read by the ribosome inside the cell. Then the ribosome synthesizes proteins according to the recipe provided by the viral DNA. Now, synthesized proteins are then released within the cell as individual units. So, this particular red string near the end of the video is an individual protein. Copies of it need to be assembled first to become a complete virus particle. So, after the ribosome synthesizes the protein, it gets expelled from the ribosome, and then it floats around the cell. But note that copies of it need to be assembled first to become a complete virus particle. Imagine multiple copies of these proteins floating aimlessly, going to different directions around the cell. So we ask, how do they know that? Number 1, they need to stick to one another to form a bigger particle. And that, number 2, they need to be arranged in a particular way to form a complete virus particle. Now, let's watch this video that explains this totally genius way, explaining how a virus accomplishes self-assembly.
Here's the really clever part. These viral proteins are just floating around aimlessly in Here's the really clever part. These viral proteins are just floating around aimlessly in solution, but here's the really clever part. These viral proteins are just floating around aimlessly in solution.
Okay na? Okay na?
Here's the really clever part. These viral proteins are just floating around aimlessly in solution, but they've been built in just such a way that when they bump into each other, they snap together, and they snap together at just the right
As you
angle.
can see, each protein can be imagined to be a fundamental unit of the virus. Because of symmetry, they are able to attach to one another at just the right angle.
Here's what happens when you've got a whole load of them jiggling around together. A meaningful structure arising from a random process.
So, as you have seen, even though they just randomly swim around the cell without an instruction on how they should assemble, in the end, because of symmetry considerations, they still attach correctly to form the correct virus structure. We observed that in the case of a virus, even with the absence of a clear set of instructions on how its component protein must assemble, symmetry forces these units to form not only in the correct way, but very efficiently at that. And unfortunately for the host, After sub-assembly, the new virus then released and its life cycle continues.
Here's the really clever
Finally, we answer the question, what is so special about the icosahedron or icosahedral symmetries? Out of all the shape a virus can assume, why the icosahedron? Well, if we look at the platonic solids, which are regular 3D solid figures consisting of the same type of regular polygons as faces. So these are the platonic solids. So I have here the tetrahedron. The tetrahedron has triangular faces. You're familiar with the cube? The cube has square faces. And then the dual of the cube, called the octahedron, it has triangular faces. And then the dodecahedron, containing pentagonal faces. And we're already familiar with this one, the icosahedron, consisting of triangular faces. So it turns out the icosahedron and its dual, the dodecahedron, they have the largest number of symmetries among the 5 platonic solids. And we know, consequently, relative to size, they have the smallest fundamental units. Because they have very small fundamental units, they are very efficient shapes. In addition, relative to surface area, they have the largest volumes. So among the 5, these 2 relative to the surface area have the largest volumes. And hence, they can enclose a longer genetic material. In addition, they approximate a sphere. And hence, they have the ideal shape when it comes to movement in different directions. So to end, I do hope that in this very short talk, I was able to convince you the power of symmetry, not just in mathematics, but also as manifested in nature. I hope you realize that symmetry is not just an abstract mathematical concept, but also a tool that we can employ and take advantage of to make our daily lives more efficient. So before I end, thank you very much the Ateneum Mac Research Lab for the geometry displays outside. Thank you. Dr. Flor Francisco for the Stone Toolkit. In addition to the articles, these are my references for the videos and the content of the talk. So thank you very much, everyone.
Astounding. In the wake of our enlightening discourse on understanding our world and creating new worlds through symmetry, we've witnessed the revelation that even in the intricate dance of balance, Mathematica is still at the very fundamentals of world building.
In fact, since you mentioned world building, we hope this makes the presence of Mathematica as a magic ubiquitous, not only inside the Revelare labyrinth, but also outside it. Take the time to find the applications of Mathematica in the way you touch your world as well.
I really liked how we talked about how symmetry implies efficiency. Being a health sciences major, I can really apply this concept as I navigate my biology and chemistry books. Like his example, beyond mathematics, symmetry can be seen as the natural inclination of things.
Well, since you talked about your major, I too, as a computer science student, see a myriad of symmetries when we develop softwares, or even when we talk about theoretical computer science concepts. And also, in computer science, we put a lot of primacy on efficiency. So it's nice to know that symmetries can aid us in our pursuit of being efficient.
Now, prepare, dear equationists, for another corridor of the Revelare labyrinth. We call forth Dr. Luis Silvestre to introduce us to another guardian of mathematical wisdom who will guide us through the pathways of online conflicts.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of Dr. Silvestre, I'll be introducing the second speaker. Joshua Uihang is a PhD candidate at the Societal Computing Program of Carnegie Mellon University. His research uses a computational social science approach to understand online conflicts around the world. He graduated summa cum laude with majors in psychology and mathematics from the Ateneo de Manila University, where he also co-directs the Political Psychology of Democratization Laboratory. Let us all welcome Mr. Joshua Uihang online.
Hello, am I audible? Uh, is there anyone who can tell me if I can be heard? Can you hear me? Hello, hello. Is this good? Is this good? All right. Should I just go on ahead? Anyways. Okay, I will just assume that I can be heard since I'm not really getting any indication. But hello everyone. My name is Joshua Uiheng. I was a student here in Ateneo. Well, in my mind, not too long ago, but it's always a glad occasion for me to get to come back and present on the things that I'm currently doing. Things that I think my Ateneo education helped to prepare me for. And right now what I'm doing is I'm studying online conflict. So I thought it'd be really interesting to share some of the work I'm doing and some of the mathematical ideas that inform it. So I'm just gonna go dive right on ahead. I think I probably don't need to tell anybody in this audience that social media is messy. It's a messy affair. There's a lot of research that points to this being the case. So in 2023, it was shown that 40% of respondents in a survey had accidentally shared fake news at some point. And who knows, of course, once you share something, how many other people get to see it. On the other side of things, you see that around 41% of respondents in another survey had experienced some form of online harassment. And in 2020, but I think this is something that is applicable to many different election years, social media has been connected to polarized views during elections. So one of the really interesting things that I've been finding throughout my work, though, is that from this mess emerges order. And so I have this graphic. You know, when birds are moving through the sky, they don't account for the entire flock, right? But as the bird kind of moves in its own individual way, and it's just accounting for maybe just a few birds that are next to it, from that individual pattern of movement, you actually see this huge collective sense of order. And one of the things that's really interesting about the online world is it also seems to work that way. You know, we don't necessarily behave in a way that's accounting for all of the millions of other people on social media, but the things that we do, because of the way that we are as human beings and moving through life in groups and communities, we produce patterns when we engage in any kind of online activity. So using different mathematical tools such as probability and statistics, we're able to identify what those patterns are. We're able to determine what the regularities are in various phenomena, and predict potential outcomes based on those patterns. And we can also use concepts in graph theory and social network analysis in order to help us quantify the patterns in huge interconnected systems. So that's kind of just really the basic premise of this presentation. And throughout the rest of the slides, my intention is just to show you a few of the results from this research that we've been doing, and hopefully you'll find it interesting. So today's presentation talks broadly about two relatively disparate projects. So one, online hate in the COVID pandemic, and polarization in climate change conversations. So these are pretty huge societal issues that have been major topics of discussion in online conversation. And they've also been huge topics for sparking conflicts in society, both online and offline. So just to dive right into the work that we've been doing in the COVID-19 pandemic, here are 3 pictures from what now feels like an eternity ago. I don't have the year on this graphic, but this is essentially from the first week that I think we really knew that we were in for something that was going to be a long-term, large-scale sort of crisis. So this was March of 2020. And what you're looking at in these pictures are basically Twitter conversations. I'm still going to call the website Twitter, by the way. What we're seeing in this picture is these little dots, and these dots represent people that are on Twitter. And when you see connections between those dots, so there are little lines between those dots that are pulling the dots together, those are interactions between people on Twitter. So what you're basically seeing is that as people interact with each other, maybe you're able to notice that some dots are closer to each other than to other dots, and they kind of form these bigger masses, right? So those are some examples, right, of the emergent patterns that come out of people just being people and not necessarily trying to look a certain way as a huge conversation, but based on like these small individual behaviors, you start to see big patterns. But another thing that's salient in this graphic is the color of the dots. So the blue dots actually here are all of the accounts that are talking kind of normally. So they're talking in regular language that doesn't include hate. Meanwhile, you see the red dots. Those dots are the ones that are mentioning some kind of derogatory terms or are speaking in a hateful manner. So some things that you might notice from this graphic, right, are number one, the number of red dots is increasing. And number two, the red dots, especially in the middle graphic, is probably where it's clearest, is where the dots that are the red dots actually seem to clump together the most. So there's something here about hate where it's not just increasing in volume, not just increasing in amount, but it's also increasing in the level of organization. So those people that are expressing hate online, especially during the pandemic, they weren't just increasing, they weren't just multiplying, but they were also kind of coming together into these groups. And basically what I was trying to do with my research was trying to characterize this behavior in a more systematic fashion. And math gives us the tools to do that. So I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of the math that we were doing, but basically the high-level idea is if you look at this blank graph, let's say on the bottom left, you're going to see groups that have a low level of isolation and a low level of hate. And on the top right, you're going to see more isolated groups and more hateful that also happen to be more hateful. So we were just basically looking at this huge social network and seeing, okay, how much hate is being expressed within this group in the social network, and how isolated is that group from the rest of the network, right? And so we were starting to see that, okay, interestingly, the least isolated groups, meaning the ones that were most attached to the mainstream conversation, they also tended to be expressing less hate, right? Meanwhile, the more isolated groups tended to be expressing more hate. And so it doesn't take a lot of examples, although here in the case of an online conversation, you are seeing thousands or tens of thousands of these groups, you actually do start to see this pretty clear pattern, right? So despite all of the chaos of the online conversation, we were really starting to see, okay, there's really something going on here. And you would expect that a group that has, for example, this level of isolation somewhere here in the middle, you could predict it to have a certain level of hate based on this huge pattern that's emerging out of thousands and thousands of examples. So even if these groups don't necessarily intend, right, or as individual people in an online conversation, you're not, navigating your way through this thing in a really active way to say, I'm going to be in this isolated group with this level of hate. This sort of pattern emerges nevertheless, and this is something that you can find mathematically. So what was really interesting when we delved deeper into the hate during the pandemic. Here I'm going to show you a comparison between the US and the Philippines. What was quite interesting was when we found more hateful groups in the American conversation, it tended to be against, Asian people. So there was a lot of anti-Asian targeting of the online hate in the US. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, it was very anti-politician. So the most salient kind of hate that was present was directed towards political leaders that were perceived to be either inefficient, ineffective, or corrupt during the pandemic. But what was really interesting was even if the hate was about entirely different things in the US and the Philippines, the kinds of groups that the hate was spreading in, they looked pretty similar. So I showed you the isolation example earlier just to illustrate the techniques that we were using. But other features of these groups were also notable. So number one, the more hateful groups usually tended to be smaller. They tended to be less dense, which was kind of surprising to us. They tended to be more isolated, and they tended to be more hierarchical. So the basic idea here is that hate seems to be spreading in these small isolated groups where maybe not everybody is talking to everybody else, but you see the presence of very strong, influential leaders. So you're basically seeing that hate becomes normalized within smaller, maybe fringe communities that happen to have strong leaderly figures. What was really interesting was when we pushed this analysis further to look at the activity of fake accounts. So one of the things that we saw was when you start to inject fake accounts into these groups. So we were basically looking at, okay, these are the hate groups, these are their characteristics. Now let's see which ones actually have more fake accounts as opposed to, real people. And one of the interesting things was when you look at the activities of fake accounts, number one, they actually reverse the relationship of the group density and hate. So whereas the human-dominated hate groups tended to be less dense, like I showed you earlier, when you include fake accounts into the groups, it actually switches the relationship. So this indicates that the hate groups tend to be more active when you include fake accounts into the mix. So the hate groups that have more fake accounts tend to be talking more to each other, whereas the organic ones, maybe people are just largely talking to the leader or the leader is talking to them. Meanwhile, when you look at the isolation of the groups, human-dominated hate groups already tend to be relatively isolated from the mainstream. But when you include fake accounts, they actually become even more isolated. So basically, the whole impact of fake accounts into the online conversation is really that they encourage people to talk more within their group, and that might make the hate more normalized. It can make the group feel more cohesive, and so that can also make you feel like the hate is more justified and legitimate. And further, they also try to drive a wedge between your group and the rest of the online conversation. So that kind of isolates you further and kind of shields you from opposing views that might exist. And so that really just contributes to that vicious cycle of amplifying and normalizing hate during the pandemic. So some of the takeaways from this analysis is really just that it's important to know not just how much hate there is, but how groups are formed and organized by hate. And it's really interesting also to see patterns of social network manipulation that demonstrate how, human psychology can be used to kind of legitimize otherwise, toxic and unseemly behavior online and, violent behavior online. And mathematical patterns help to demonstrate what those patterns are, and they maybe also suggest more nuanced responses to these kinds of hate activities, and in the case of fake accounts, hate campaigns. So I'll try to breeze through sort of the second half of this presentation, since I think I'm coming up to time, or we have like a Q&A portion. But basically, the second half of this is less to do with hate as like as a specific kind of online harm that individuals can enact, and more about polarization, which is this larger scale collective phenomenon, right? So I think between these two representations of online conversations, it's fairly obvious which one seems to exhibit more polarization. I think just from a really intuitive level, even if I don't tell you what polarization is, you can probably tell that the image on your right shows two communities that are very, very far apart from each other, in the sense that they just talk within their own community. And when they do talk between groups, those interactions are very few and far between. Whereas on the left, you can basically see very little distinction between the groups, and the whole graph actually seems to be quite integrated. And basically what we did was we formalized that intuition. So basically we measured, we constructed a measure where we're able to see, okay, if a group has a high score on this measure, then it has a high level of polarization, right? So it kind of behaves in a way that's really, really biased towards its in-group, and kind of in contrast, it behaves in a very different way towards the out-group. And so in the case of climate change conversations, we were basically seeing that in general, it's climate change disbelievers that kind of exhibit more behavior that we would characterize as more polarized. And it's quite interesting to see that it's not really a constant state, rather there are fluctuations over time. So this is a 2-year study, so it's like just hundreds of millions of tweets over this 2-year period. And you actually see there are periods when the believers actually behave in a very unpolarized way, but they also have periods of extreme polarization as well. What we found was more interesting, though, was when higher levels of polarization were observed, there were actually really divergent patterns of how much believers and disbelievers would use disaster-related words. So when you saw higher levels of polarization, disbelievers tended to talk about disasters a little bit more, which is actually quite surprising to us. And this was whether you used hashtags or words, there's a pretty consistent pattern here, right? So yeah. What was most interesting, though, was when we actually linked the polarization levels to periods of extreme climate distress. So in this case, we were looking at extreme surface temperature anomalies. And what was really interesting is, especially if you look at the right half of this graphic, was in periods of higher anomalies in surface temperature, so extreme climate events, you actually saw higher levels of polarization in the online conversation. So the way we were spinning this was kind of just saying that as the world heats up, so do online conversations, which was really interesting. I'm just going to skip over this, but the basic idea is that the websites that believers and disbelievers are linking to are extremely different as well. And so this has something to do with how polarization is not just about feelings, but also about, how the world is perceived and constructed between these two groups. And the takeaways here are really just that, like I said, polarization is both about information and emotion, and it's linked the online world is linked to these offline disruptions in a way that needs a lot more exploration to see, what are the conditions for the offline world to shape online conversations, and maybe more pertinent for platforms and people that want to change the world through using the internet, how the online conversations also shape offline realities. And as a closing note, maybe just leading us towards that Q&A portion that's scheduled. Basically, I hope that what I've shared here illustrates how mathematical tools can help us understand some of the big divisions in our global conversations, whether it be the pandemic, the climate change, and in a lot of I think more familiar research in this area, elections and other kinds of political conflicts. So that was my presentation. We wrote a bunch of papers in this area, so you can feel free to take a look at those. But yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, we can. That's okay. I'll do it.
Thank you, Mr. Joshua Oiheng, for that masterful exploration of the mathematical realm of online conflicts. We're certain that many of our participants are equally fascinated by the interconnectedness of mathematical and digital discourses.
Indeed, the demonstration we've witnessed today serves as a testament to the boundless applications of mathematics. I find it so interesting how mathematics was used to dissect and understand a common social phenomenon in this age of social media. May we request everyone who's leaving to please tone down your voices. Thank you. But of course, undoubtedly, you likely have questions you would like to clear. The presence of these confusions is the work of the shadow, an ancient spirit that sows uncertainty and chaos, questioning Mathematica itself.
We ask you to scan the code or go to pigeonhole.at/revelare, which is also flashed on the screen. Your entry shall grant you the ability to relay your doubts and questions so you can dispel the disarray caused by the shadow. You may also speak in the mic stationed on the stairs if you wish to do so.
Hi, Joshua. We have a question for you from our pigeonhole.
Oh, nice. Great. Go ahead. Is anybody reading the question? Okay. Ah, should I just go ahead and answer it? There are quite a few, actually. There are 3 questions now. So I'm just gonna go ahead. I'm not sure if I'm audible again, but so here are some questions. How did I analyze tweets? Did I read a million tweets or did I filter the keywords? And another question is, how should recommendation algorithms be changed to minimize the propagation of hate? So I think it probably goes without saying that I did not read a million tweets. But using mathematical tools, we are able to find patterns in these tweets. So, if you look at 3 tweets that express a certain amount of hate, you probably start to see, okay, the hate starts to use these certain words, right, in combination with each other in this particular sequence. If you look at maybe 100 tweets, you start to see a more consistent pattern. What algorithms are really good at doing is extrapolating from millions and millions of examples, and so we're able to draw out patterns computationally without having to read all of them. Yeah, I don't know if I answered that. Should I keep going? I feel like all of the questions are.
Hi, Joshua. We have a question from our on-site
Yes.
audience.
Hello. I just wanted to. It's actually, I think, a follow-up question to the methods that you used. I just wanted to know if you used any methods such as tokenism. How did you define hate when you analyzed the texts? Was there just a basket of words that you used that's predetermined, or did you use anything, or did you use the context of the tweets themselves and you just trained the model? Or I just want to know how you used, what methods you used to analyze that sentiment.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I assume based on how you're asking the question that you are a little more familiar with computational language modeling. So I didn't want to go into too much detail about that in my talk just because of the more general kind of approach I wanted to take. But yeah, as you mentioned, we did look at the context of the tweets. It wasn't a basket of words, bag of words sort of situation. We were using machine learning models that embed the tweets into this high dimensional space and link it to whether or not it's an example of hate. So the model is specifically trained on 15 different data sets of hate speech and non-hate speech. So the aim is for it to be generalizable across different contexts. And we did also a lot of manual review of the model predictions in order to make sure that there is no drift in the predictions given the domain of the conversation. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Yes, it did. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. We have a question for Dr. Loyola. In the subject of nature, are humans symmetrical? And if so, how efficient are we? Will we ever be symmetrically efficient?
I think as far as evolution is concerned, there are some instances wherein we don't really have to be symmetrical, but maybe some parts of us are symmetrical in the sense that there's still some repetitions involved. For example, the human body is not really symmetrical. If you look at our internal organs, for example, yung intestines, hindi man siya symmetrical eh. But because of evolutions and there are of course certainly some preferred or better configuration as far as human body is concerned, then in evolutions be the one that will be considered. So yeah.
Hello. I also have a question for Dr. Loyola. Yes. You've mentioned that yes, viruses are very efficient. It's because of their high symmetry. But does that also mean that the way to combat them is to also use this idea of symmetry? I mean, mas madali ba silang labanan because they're highly symmetric?
Yes, that's a very good question. I think so, yes, because if you look at a virus, it's just a repeated structure. So it's not really something na randomly looking, or it's not irregular, it's regular in shape. So therefore, I think once you're able to understand one portion of it, you tend to understand all the other portions of the entire virus. So therefore, I think that's one way to combat a virus.
Any more on-site questions?
We have another question.
This question is for Dr. Loyola. What determined the number, which is 5, for the different transformations that you mentioned kanina? How do we know that there isn't like a 6th possible transformation, so that we could replicate like the fundamental group and form, the stuff that we talked about?
That's a good question. But actually, it can be proved that mathematically there are only 5 possible symmetries of the plane. But if you go to higher dimensions, there will be more. For example, in 3 dimensions, you also have what we call inversion, roto-inversion, roto-reflection, and others. If you go to higher dimensions, there will be more. But it can be proved mathematically using geometry, either discrete geometry or differential geometry, that there are only 5 when it comes to plane isometries.
Hi po, I have a follow-up to that. Can we model or like can we determine the number of operations given the dimensions that we have? Or like is it not fixed given some dimension number?
I think I'm not sure if there's a particular formula, but per dimension you should be able to identify how many there are. But I don't think there's a particular formula that you can use. But it will get higher and higher as you go to higher dimensions. Because you can represent, for example, an isometry by a matrix. A matrix that's, for example, orthogonal. Therefore, the classification of an isometry will just depend on the classification of orthogonal matrices that you have per dimension. Very good. That's a very good question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Loyola and Mr. Uheng. Thank you also to everyone who shared their questions with us. We shall now move to the next part of the program.
So thank you again, Dr. Loyola and Mr. Uyheng, for shedding further light on your talks. Let me now call on Fran, one of the MathCon project heads, to present the certificates of appreciation for our speakers.
Alright, so good afternoon everyone. Sana gising pa kayo, ayan. Sigawan naman kayo dyan! Wait lang, medyo 2 weeks pa lang tayo from ORSEM. Wait lang. Alright, students, can I get a yeah, yeah? Alright, okay. So, the Ateneo de Manila University and the Ateneo Mathematics Society present these certificates of appreciation to Dr. Mark Loyola and Mr. Joshua Uyheng for sharing their expertise as speakers in the MathCon 2023 Revelare, given this 22nd day of August 2023 at Leong Hall Auditorium, Ateneo de Manila University. Signed by the project heads of MathCon 2023 and the AMS Top 5. All right, so we're inviting Dr. Loyola for a photo op.
Now, as we unlock the secrets after observing the speakers, we begin to understand that Mathematica is not as it seems, because there lies more to its essence than what meets the eye. Before we proceed with the next speakers, we will take a 15-minute break to mark the first half of our journey. Allow ourselves to pause, breathe, and contemplate the insights inspired by the labyrinth. Also, to everyone who stayed here, may we ask everyone to occupy the first row seats as we expect an influx of other audience. So please occupy the first row seats. Thank you. Lastly, please fill up the evaluation form. Flash on the screen at link.atheneomathsociety.org/mathcon2324 evals form.
The whole class.
magics because you have many secrets yet to unlock. Remember, Mathematica is a dark art not because it eludes perception and reason, but because its applications and potential are hidden in plain sight.
The darkness only grows as we step further into the labyrinth. Some of you may falter, and others may find their own dead ends. Well, fear not, dear equationists. A third warlock of eminent knowledge is here to guide us further. For this session, we'll be having 2 talks followed by a Q&A. We kindly encourage everyone to fully immerse themselves in both of the talks to accomplish the journey of Revelare. We give the stage to Mr. DJ Benito to call forth the third speaker to explore with us the underlying mathematics of traffic and transport.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So our first speaker for the second set is Mr. Lionel Tangangco. He's a senior manager in Weasel Foundation Incorporated. In his personal capacity, he leads and supports civil society organizations involved in malnutrition, transportation, and public budgeting and finance. He previously served as the director in the Department of Finance, where he led the team of civil servants shepherding the passage and implementation of the government's priority economic legislation and priority projects during the COVID-19 crisis and recovery. He graduated as the class valedictorian and summa cum laude from Ateneo de Manila University with degrees in Management Engineering and Economic Honors. He completed the World Bank Annenberg Executive Course in Leadership Strategy and Reform Communication in Los Angeles, USA in 2019. In his spare time, Lionel reads books on economic history and physics and plays Valorant and other PC games with his wife. Yes. I had the chance to work with him and his wife, and they are some of the brightest, smartest, but very kind people that I've worked with. So let's give a round of applause to Mr. Lionel.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hi, how are you guys? Good, good. Okay, so yeah, thank you to the math department and AMS for inviting me. So na-mention ni Kuya Daniel that I'm married, no? My wife was actually the president of AMS during our time. So pag nagtawag yung math dep or AMS, I always have to come. Yeah. Anyway, so today we're gonna talk about math and mobility. No, maybe to start, no, I'll introduce muna the coalition I'm representing. No, it's a coalition of civil society organizations, no, who have interest in mobility. So I'll just introduce it quickly. No, the Move Us On Coalition was formed in response to the transport crisis, which was further worsened by COVID-19. So we're a broad civil society coalition of 140 plus organizations and many more citizens pushing for safer and more humane and inclusive public transport. We're gonna talk about that later. So sino-sino kami, no? We're a community of commuters, transport workers, no? So transport worker unions, for example, jeepney driver unions, labor unions, student groups, PWDs, senior citizens, climate advocates, cyclists, medical frontliners, urban planners, and other sectors. And we're here together on the mission to promote public transportation. So some things that the coalition has done so far, no, we work closely with government, no, executive and legislative Congress to pass so far 32 billion budget, no, for active transport and public transport. And we're committed to shaping the discourse on prioritizing the movement of people instead of vehicles on our roads, no. Kung medyo vague yan, it's okay. We're gonna go through it together. Let me begin with a quick survey, no? Show of hands, please, okay? So, how many of you, now please raise your hand, are dormers, no? Or you live nearby, okay? Higher? Wow, dami. Oh my gosh, okay. Sige. Is it because it's so hard to get here, kaya you stay here? Oh my gosh, okay. Ang lala pala ng traffic talaga sa Katip, no? Oh my God. Okay, next.
How many among you here take public transport to get to school? Yes, very good. And I say public transport without, hindi kasama yung Grab, Angkas, ganyan. Hindi mo na kasama, okay? Right, very good, very good. Okay. How many of you ride a bike, no? Or personal mobility devices, scooters, etc.? I saw some bike racks there, no? Nice, okay, good. Sana more pa. How many among you here take Grab, Angkas, or other TNVS? Okay? Alright? Okay lang. No, I mean like typically you use a number of modes, right? Depending on the day, depending on how late you wake up, diba? Kailangan mo mag-aral on the way to school, ganyan. How many among you drive a car or motorcycle to school? Okay lang, ganito ako. So I'm a car owner and but I'm trying to learn public transport, okay? Okay. Ito, again, reset, no? How many among you have fun moving around in Metro Manila? Talaga? Okay. No, that's good. Actually, when you take, hello? Hi, hello. Okay. So when you take public transport, when you walk, you actually see how nice our cities are, no? Okay. How many of you now think na wala ng pag-asa yung traffic sa Metro Manila? Yan. Very good. Okay. But I'm not saying that's a good attitude. I'm saying that's a good baseline that we're gonna try to change with our conversation today. Okay ba yan? Alright. Okay. Sige. So, let's think about that mobility problem, no? Whenever I think about mga problems that society faces, ganyan, I try to think about it in three regards, no? So, first is, who are affected? No? Sino ba yung problem owners ng problem? Sino yung victims, no? Or sino yung nag-experience ng problem na yon? And what do they want or envision for themselves, no? Because that's how development ought to be, right? It doesn't have to be top-down, ganyan. It's best if you ask the problem owners what they want. Second, ano yung causes, no? What are the causes of the mobility problem, no? Yung language natin usually dyan is traffic, diba? Ano bang causes ng traffic? And based on the causes, right, after we do some sort of analysis, we're gonna think about ano ba yung mga possible solutions. And the solutions will be tied to number 1 and number 2, right? So yung 1 yung gusto nating abutin, yun yung vision, and then the solutions have to address the root causes, no? Or to some extent. Okay, so let's go, no? First is, sino ba yung affected, no? And what do they envision for themselves? I have here a couple of photos, and I want you guys to shout out what's wrong with the photo. Okay ba yan? Yeah, let's do that. Okay. So the photo on the left, what do you see? What's wrong? Sidewalk. Very good. It's very narrow, diba? Very narrow, tapos may nakaharang pang poste, ganyan. So mafa-force kang maglakad sa shared lanes, no? Yung car lane, quote unquote, but it's actually a shared lane. And that's not good. Sa second photo, what's wrong? No? Walang PWD like friendly walkway, right? What are the problems here? No? I'll read, baka hindi na makita sa likod. So nakasulat, sitwasyon ng mga commuter ngayong gabi dito sa EDSA Kamuning. And the article from ABS-CBN News says, after about 8 hours or more grueling hours at work, commuters are forced to allot another hour or so on their feet to catch a ride home. Yeah, so it's very sobering, no? And malala talaga siya, no? Later on, when we talk about some data, some numbers, makita natin gaano siya kalala. Okay, here, what's wrong here in this picture? I hear words bike lanes, yeah? Bike? Ano pa? Yeah, so tingnan natin, no? So the bikers, sino ba dito nagbabike ulit? Pwede higher? Nagbo-bike? Okay, not so much yet, no? But I'm learning how to bike, and grabe guys, nakatakot pala talaga mag-bike kapag walang protected bike lane, no? And you see here my motorcycle on the bike lane. And for those of you who see streets, diba, the shared lanes don't work, diba? Itong shared or sharrows, that's what they call it. Yung walang physical barrier, they don't work kasi everyone goes in there lang eh. And you know, who else are affected? Something that people don't remember, no, when we talk about transport is road safety, no? And we're gonna look at some data later on. Ilan ba yung mga children, Filipino children na namamatay every day because of road crashes? No? Sila yung affected. Okay? Tayong mga car owners, no, and car users were also affected, but not as much as the more vulnerable, no, na gumagamit ng kalsada. To put it into perspective, let's look at the data. And I put this icon there every time there's like a math application. Okay, so for our purposes, hindi an exclamation point. That's a factorial sign. Kasi math, diba? Oh yeah, okay. So, let's look at the data, diba? Okay, yun yung mga experience, right? That's the experience. You have your own experiences. Let's now look at the data. Let's answer the same questions using the data. Sorry. Okay. Who are affected? No? When we look at the data, we'll see there are actually surveys being done by SWS, by the UP National Center for Transportation Studies. You have these amazing academics and public opinion people who come out with these surveys that can be used for public policy making. And there's actually a lot of data on vehicle ownership, no, and biking, especially recently. And this is an SWS survey showing bike ownership versus motor vehicle ownership among adults. No? And what do you see here? So for those of us who think about the mobility problem as traffic, no, yung sumasakay ng kotse, ganyan, marami tayong nakitang kotse, diba? But actually, four-wheeled motor vehicles are just 6%, no, of households. 6% lang ng households ang may sasakyan. Mas marami pang nagbabike, no? 4:1. Maraming nagbumotor, no? And what's the point here, no? And what do we say to government about this? When we plan kasi, no, and you'll see this, when we budget, when we do transport planning, etc., and traffic management, no, even that term traffic management, it's very car-centric. No? We plan with cars in mind. Yung sa Katipunan, kung pansinin niyo, ang pedestrians, they don't belong on the street. They belong up there sa overpass. No? Paano na kung PWD? Right? It's very difficult. So, hindi siya people-centric, but car-centric. But what we're saying is, actually, sobrang konti lang na nag-own ng sasakyan. Okay, so kanina it's by vehicle ownership, right? Ownership. Ngayon, ridership naman. So anong ginagamit mo to get to where you want to go? So there's data from a survey, no, of Greater Manila. Kanina nationwide, ito Greater Manila. 80% of daily travel in Metro Manila is actually by public or active transport. Active transport meaning walking, cycling, etc. And 20% lang yung private. No? So, this is what I was talking about kanina. A lot of our thinking right now, our policy making, the way we look at traffic is this na mas marami nagbabike, mas marami nagtitake ng public transport, moving of goods, etc., taxis. Pero ang priority, yung cars. Right? Yung mga pedestriante, sa taas sila, sa walkway sila, no? Overpass, yung, ano. Ang dapat, kung sinong mas marami, sila yung priority. Right? Okay. And yun, so the problem isn't so much traffic, no? But actually, mobility, no? Moving people, not moving cars. Okay, so the first question was, sino bang affected? Now, the second question is, what do they want? Ano bang vision nila? Ano bang gusto nila? 87% of Filipinos actually want public transport, bikes, and pedestrians prioritized over private vehicles in terms of road space. No? So, actually, and it's so different from our daily experience. Sa daily experience, kung magbilang ka, kung tingnan mo yung kasal, tingnan mo yung katip, right? Pag traffic, isang lane ng trucks, fine, it's okay, they're moving goods, but the rest are mostly private cars, right? Including our cars too, yung mga nagda-drive, diba? When actually, ang gusto ng majority ng Filipinos ay mabigyan ng priority yung public transport, yung bike, yung pedestrians, no? So what does this mean physically, no? So you'll see dedicated bus lanes, no? Those are in places like Seoul, no, sa Korea. That's one of the first things they did to deal with traffic. Dedicated bus lane, parang sa EDSA natin. And then wider walkways, and then protected bike lanes. Even removing car lanes, no, or shared lanes to transform them there. Sorry, hindi pala to hindi yan to scale. Pansinin nyo, diba? Parang laki ng 7 and 6 na 87. Yan. So, hindi siya to scale. Imagine na lang, extend na lang dyan. Okay. 85% actually believe that their localities can become great places for walking and cycling. Usually, when we talk to policymakers, or tayo, no, sa experience natin, inisip natin na hindi actually parang viable ang cycling. No? Or hindi viable ang walking. Ang reality dyan is hindi pa viable. No? Because some things have to be in place. Protected bike lanes, better walkways, better public transportation for it to be viable. But the Filipinos believe na it's possible. Pwede. Diba? Yan. Okay. Some other numbers and I summarize na lang here. I put here yung principles ng coalition, or what we believe in. sino yung main problem owners, and ano yung vision nila for themselves. So on the principle of ligtas, no, or road safety, sino bang problem owners dyan? You have your commuters, no? Kasi sila yung pinaka-vulnerable sa kalsada eh. Diba? I mean, you know this. Like, bangga ka ng car collision or crash, people are, could be fine. But car to people, diba? Dehado yung tao. Cyclists, same reason, right? And children, no? This is, I think, understated eh. But the official government data is that at least 4 to 5 children die each day due to road crashes in the Philippines. Imagine that, 4 to 5, no? Baka konti siya, but imagine nyo if those kasama dun sa 4 to 5 yung mga loved ones nyo. Right? Your younger siblings, your nephews, nieces, your cousins, going to school, for example, tas mabundol. And 4 to 5 each day. It's crazy. And what's the vision? The vision's called Vision Zero. No, it's a term that it's like international term siya on road safety. 0 fatalities and 0 severe injuries. Gusto natin yung transport makatao, no? And sino ba yung main problem owners dito? Number 1 would be transport workers. No, it's something we can talk about later a bit, pero like the modernization program has a huge impact on transport workers. The stance of the coalition is we should proceed with modernizing the PUVs, pero there's a way to do it right. Second, yung commuters, no? And what we want is dignified mobility. Hindi yung 9 hours ka na nga sa work, no? Or 9.5 because you have lunch break. Pero papasok mo 3 hours yung commute mo, pauwi 3 hours yung commute mo. Wala ka ng oras sa family mo. You barely, have any rest. And you don't have time, no, for the things that you value. And yung last is para sa lahat, no? And kasama dyan yung mga persons with disability, right? So again, some numbers, there are around 1.9 million na identified na PWDs right now. I think this is understated, no? And of these, no, only around 18% are in the labor force, no, meaning looking for work or working, right? Compared to the national average, which is 60%, right? And I think a huge part of that, I'm sure there are studies there to prove it, a huge part of that is mobility, right? Kasi how do you get to work kung yung MRT station sa may Shaw Boulevard, you have to climb 3 flights of stairs, tapos sira yung elevator. May nag-commute ba doon? Sa Shaw Station, ayan. That's the closest MRT station to my house. My God, you have to climb 3 flights of stairs. How do we encourage, like, how do we help PWDs find meaningful work kung ganyan yung mobility situation? So what we want is accessible and dignified transport. No? Yung, wala lang, you can go to work kahit na PWD, kahit naka-crutches ka. Kasama, by the way, dyan yung mga persons with limited mobility, no? Yung mga buntis or may injury, etc. And one of our PWD advocates says, you know what, all of you at some point, pag tumanda kayo, all of you at some point magiging PWD din kayo. So you have to start thinking about accessibility now. Okay. So yan. So those are the people who are affected by the mobility problem. And that's what they want for themselves. No? So let's now look at the problem. No? Ano ba yung causes ng mobility problem natin? I put here 5, no? But I've just made it simple with 5 arrows, but they're interrelated. There are more causes, but I'll focus on these 5 and later 3, no? First would be what I mentioned kanina, yung ating car-centric na culture. And there's something called induced demand in car use. Actually, induced demand in transportation in general. What do we mean by induced demand? So induced demand is when you make the environment conducive for a certain mode of transport. Doon pupunta yung mga tao. No? So what do I mean? We keep building roads, no? Na walang allocation for public transport. Ang liit ng budget for public transport, so we're going to talk about later. So naturally, people will want to buy cars, diba? So the more roads you make, the wider you make your roads, people will keep buying cars, and it's gonna keep getting more congested. Then mag-road widening ka ulit. It's a vicious cycle, no? It's something you can take a look at, induced demand. Second would be imbalanced and lacking public budget for mobility. By public budget, I mean budget from our taxpayer money, no? We'll talk about that a bit later. Third would be wrong success metrics, no, of transport agencies. We'll talk about that a bit later also. A fourth is little to no expansion of public transport supply, and it's being outpaced by things like car sales, outpaced by population growth, especially in the cities. And also in general, mga issues in transport governance and policies, land use planning, etc. We can talk about it later, no, if you're curious. So yeah, so right now we're gonna talk about 3, no? Yung medyo may data ako to add here. Oops, sorry. Yan. So these three. Okay. So let's tackle the first one. Imbalance and lacking public budget for people-centric mobility. So the coalition has been doing some research, and ito yung part ng mga research na iko-quote ko. No? So first is, of the 2.8 trillion peso road-based infrastructure budget. Okay, let's break that down. It's 2.8 trillion pesos. It's a number that's so huge, no? Hard to imagine, but taxpayer money yan. That are road-based infrastructure budget. So what do we mean here, no? Examples dyan yung mga road widening, maintenance, construction, bagong kalsada, etc. Kaya road-based tapos infrastructure. For 2010 to 2021, only 1% or 40 billion has been allocated to improving road-based public transport. And what do you mean by road-based public transport? Mga jeepney terminal, bus terminal, etc. Even cycling infrastructure like protected bike lanes, etc. Pedestrian infrastructure. Ayan, dyan pala. Yun. So what you see here is sobrang imbalanced yung budget, right? We keep building new roads, ganyan, na 6% lang pala ng Filipino households mainly ang nakikinabang. Right? It's 99%, my God. And then just 1% yung for everyone else. No? Yung mga commuters, bahala na kayo dyan sa tira-tira ng budget natin. No? That's why isa sa mga areas of engagement ng coalition is really the public budget. Second, okay, kanina diba, we compared itong mga stuff, no? Public transport, cycling, and pedestrian infrastructure to the broader road budget. No? Ngayon, we're gonna compare it to the transportation department budget. No? So, iba-ibang sectors na you have rail, you have aviation, no? Rail as in railroads, and kasama yung mga MRT, LRT, etc. Aviation, maritime, and land public transport. Dito yung mga buses, jeep, cycling, etc. The problem with our budget now is that the public transport budget is skewed towards rail projects, no? And it's not so bad, no, to invest in rail projects. But investing all of your capital expenditure or your investment, no, yung investment envelope mo sa railways, it's not a reasonable strategy. Why? Kasi rail is very expensive, no? Gagawa ka ng railway, sobrang gastos yan. Tapos after mo i-build yan, malamang sa malamang meron kang subsidies. So like every year, I think we spend 7 to 8 billion pesos subsidizing the MRT fares. When they're actually, it's easier, it's faster, no, and it's cheaper to make dedicate a BRT instead, no. In the long run, you need both, no. Pero sa urgent needs natin, you need the BRT or bus rapid transit, you need jeepneys, you need or modern jeeps, you need protected bike lanes, and they're much cheaper to make. For example, ito, diba, 153 billion yan, yung proposed for next year. That's actually just 2 projects. No? Or bulk of that is just 2 projects. One is the North-South Commuter Rail and one is the Metro Manila Subway. Right? And okay, good for those who are here, diba? We'll experience it maybe 2028, 2030, fine. Magtitiis tayo ng 7 years. Pero what about now? What about outside Metro Manila or Greater Metro Manila area, diba? Wala. Bahala sila. So parang it's this parang very hands-off approach to road-based public transport and active transport, no? Na we're trying to change. Okay. So yun. Ay, nandiyan pala si factorial sign ulit kasi it's another application of math. We're gonna go back to these exclamation points later, no? Okay, so ngayon, put them all together, no? Lahat ng plano ng government na gastusin in terms of rail, road, etc. Are we gonna hit public transport demand? No? And the answer is no. No? The overall transport supply shortfall in the GCR could still be as high as 2.8 million daily passenger trips by 2030. And this as of 2021. No? So ngayon may bagong plan na yung government like they have a longer list of projects they want to invest in. So we have to update this. No? But my guess is it won't hit yung kailangan pa rin natin. So itong mga red dotted dash box natin yan, that's the supply shortfall. And what happens when you have supply shortfall? That's your long queuing lines, diba? Yung, yan, ganun, diba? Hindi siya makatao na transport. Okay. Ayan. So, that's 2A, right? That's the first one, yung imbalanced and lacking public budget. What's the second? Second would be wrong success metrics of transport agencies. So what I have flashed here are the performance indicators ng MMDA, no? Familiar ba kayo sa MMDA? Yung mga nanguhuli. No, just kidding. No. They have a lot of work, no? And among them is transport management. And something we've been saying, no, and we're happy that minds are changing, is yung KPI nyo or key performance indicator are wrong. No? Ano may examples ng KPIs nila? Here, I'll put it here na lang. KPIs nila are vehicle speeds. No? So sa mga hindi makita sa likod, no, nakasulat dyan, first quarter, 29 kph. Second quarter, 27. Third, 25. Fourth, 25.5 or like something like ganyan, 25.5 kph. What we're saying is, mali yung mali yung key performance indicator. Yung goals niyo as an organization, mali. Kasi gusto mo pabilis yung kotse. Pero hindi mo na-take into account na bus ba yan? Or is that a four-wheeled vehicle na isa lang ba yung tao? Diba? What if you allot more space for public transport? Diba? And the idea is you don't count vehicles, right? You count people. Because that's what matters anyways. It's people going from one place to another. And this is 2015. 2015 yata yan. Okay, here. Ito yung mga KPIs ng Department of Transportation, no, sa Land Public Transportation Program in 2022, no? And ano yung mga mali dito? Look at it, no? So that's how the government like does it, no? Every year they have their KPIs ganyan. Kasama dito yung % increase in public transport vehicles modernized, no? Or like in other words, improved model year, no? So for example, yung mga jeep na whatever, newer model na sila, and use of environmentally friendly fuel. Right? My question is, why focus on the units when there are plenty of plenty of components to the modernization program? What's our vision ba, no? Like what's our vision for jeeps and whatnot? Yung ideal talaga is they're all cooperativized along a route. Right? So there's a route, for example, tas lahat yan iisang cooperative yung nag-own. So alam niyo naman AMPC, tama ba? Sa Gonzaga, familiar na kayo doon? Diba? It's Ateneo Multi-Purpose Cooperative, right? And what happens there is you have employees who are also owners, right? That's why it's a cooperative, no? And what we want, no, is along a route, the jeepney drivers and operators are co-owners of sort of like cooperative that runs the route. And then, for public transport to be reliable, etc., sino ba dito naka-abroad na? Can I ask? Nakapag-abroad na, okay? Have you guys taken the buses abroad? You see schedules, right? And then you can rely on them, right? And they're all on Google Maps, right? Yeah, so that's what we want for public transport. And you can do that if you consolidate everyone on a route, and then instead of on-street competition, which is what's happening now, diba, mga jeepney nag-aagawan, ganyan, dahil iisang entity na lang sila, centralized na yung fare collection. Right? Hello? Right. So, centralized na yung fare collection. So, instead, yung KPI nila, no, instead of mag-aaway-away sila for mga riders, ang gagawin nila is, they'll just follow a determined schedule. Since centralized naman yung fare collection nila, they'll just follow the schedule, and then okay na sila, no? Parang at the end of the day, kung ano man yung na-collect through, best sana if electronic yung methods, no, of collecting the fares, share, hati-hati sila at the end of the day, right? So there's like other things, no? It's not just changing the units that you need. You need to modernize the system, right? So here, no, and there are sa regulatory side naman, no. I won't bore you now, but there's nothing on ensuring adequate supply of transportation, nothing on the commuter experience, nothing on the reliability of transport. Right? So kung ganito yung KPIs ng agency mo, hindi talaga tatama yung performance niya, di ba? Okay. The third problem is little to no expansion of public transport supply. The issue kasi with road-based public transport, no, is that it's regulated, meaning there's an agency called the LTFRB that releases franchises. Before ka pwedeng mamasada ng jeep or whatever, you have to apply sa LTFRB to get a franchise, no? It's like the state allowing you to run the route, ganyan. The problem is there's been no meaningful increase in supply of this one, no? Yung franchises, based on underground reports and available franchise data. So, ilang weeks na ako nag-request sa LTFRB ng data through FY, but they don't send it. So, we just use like underground reports. Meanwhile, no, you have the auto industry growing like crazy, diba? So anong nangyayari? Kung isipin niyo, limited road space, fine, okay, you expand, you build, but it's still limited, diba? Parami yung sasakyan, no, private cars, pero hindi naman dumadami yung bus, hindi dumadami yung jeep, diba? And baka kumukonti pa nga. So natural, you'll have a mobility problem. What are other signs of this? The proliferation of colorum vehicles. Familiar ba kayo ng colorum? Yan. Colorum yung mga hindi registered. No? It's evidence that plenty of commuter demand goes unmet by regulated public transport. Diba? Yun yung evidence mo eh. The market is already finding a way to fulfill consumer demand. And, some nerdiness, transport inflation, no, or yung pagtaas ng presyo ng transportation, which is a sign of undersupply, outpaces overall inflation. So, mas mataas pa sa pagtaas ng prices ng overall, basket of goods, yung transportation, no? Imagine mo, like, those are things that people, the commuters, no, they have to pay. Wala man silang choice to get to work. They have to pay that. And that prices keep increasing because of undersupply. So putting them all together, no, and sort of end, no, ano ba yung possible solutions dyan? Again, this is our problem, no? This is our main problem. These are the causes. So ano yung mga proposed reforms ng coalition? Sa car-centric culture, no, we're pushing for policies to deter car use. Part of that is making parking expensive. And we're encouraging the shift to public transport and active transport. Second, we want a more balanced and people-centric budget, especially for road-based public transport and active transport. We want better success metrics. We want to expand public transport supply, and we want governance reforms of the transportation. So I'll just share a bit of what we're doing quickly. So every year, we come up with a proposed budget, and we send it to the Department of Budget Management, we send it to the Department of Transportation, and ito, meron kaming proposed budget na we lobby, no, or like we advocate for every year. And we're continuing to do it now. We have proposed metrics na. Parang sinabi namin sa DOTR, ito na yung pwede na gawing success metrics. And look at the examples, right? There's commuter journey time, waiting time, travel time, transfer time, and last mile time. I'll talk about the time things later. Availability of transport. Dapat X% of the population is living within Y minutes of a public transport stop, no? Diba? Isn't that nice? Reliability of transport, no more than an average of X minutes waiting, right? Accessibility of transport, may mga safety ratings na global standards, ganyan. Ano yung cost of transport? Cost per day, cost per kilometer, cost as a share of your total expenditures, and other things like quality and customer satisfaction. You have more metrics pa na. This is user-centered. So there's system, there's infrastructure quality. Yun. So this is an example of my commute when I was a student. Although I also drove, no. Pero whenever I commuted, I lived in Barangay Mariana sa QC, and then I came here, no. So ang sakay ko dati is around 40 minutes yan, all in all. And I break it down here. So I wait here for a trike, 2 minutes. I ride the trike to Betigo, that's 5 minutes. And then I walk up the stairs na walang elevator, or may elevator pero hindi gumagana. Yan. So mag-aantay ako ng tren na umabot, Betigo to Katipunan, and then maglalakad ako dun sa ilalim ng Aurora overpass. Magta-trike ako here to Leong, for example, ganyan. And with these things, no, with these metrics, you can actually get some insights there, no? So how much of my journey was spent waiting? I calculated it here, it's around 18%. How much of my journey was spent on transfer? It's around 15%. This isn't too bad, no? I mean, for those of you who commute regularly and you commute during rush hour, this isn't bad. But look at it, no? If you add it up, that's around 33%, right? 1/3 of my commute was actually waiting and transfers. No? And this is part of what the government has to take a look at. Kasi a lot of the metrics there are travel time lang. So from, ito lang ang capture niya, yung number 5, Betigo to Katipunan. And then government or whoever will say, maiksi na yung travel time dahil marami kaming nilagay na trend dyan, marami ng cars, no? Yung cars as in like train cars. Mabilis na yung takbo dyan. Pero actually, the whole commuter experience is a lot of waiting and transfers also. That's why very important na maging accessible siya, important na maging siya, friendly sa lahat, no? And something that, is also good to take a look at, ano ba yung parts ng trip that are inaccessible or unsafe, no? So ano yung mga na-identify ko? LRT stations had no elevators or hindi gumagana na escalator. Yung parang paasa na escalator, yung kailangan pa rin maglakad, tas they're higher steps, so it's worse, di ba? Walkways are too narrow, no? Plenty of conflict zones during the walk to the trike terminal, no, from Katipunan Station. And okay lang ako because I'm healthy, right? I mean, I can walk easily, diba? I get tired, but I'm okay. Okay, so ito na yung sentence. To end, no? Yung theme natin today is math makes the invisible visible. And looking back at our conversation today, what are the ways that math made the invisible visible? First, Math makes the broader perspective visible. Remember? Tayo kasi, honestly, we're very privileged, right? I mean, far majority of you stay nearby because you can afford it. Right? What if those who can't, diba? Paano? And that's what math gives you. Gives you the broader perspective. Second, math makes priorities visible. And we see it dun sa analysis natin of the public budgets. Right? Because budget is one of the purest expressions of a politician or a government's priority. Eh. Kung priority yan, pagagastos ko yan. Right? Your families are investing in your education because it's important to them. Diba? Yun. Third, math makes performance visible. No? As in performance ng government agencies, for example. When we talked about the success metrics. And math makes the future visible. Now remember like kanina may graph ng demand and then shortfall, etc. And there are higher math applications in transport planning and management that are really cool. No? Worth nerding out. I don't get the math either, but they're really cool. Okay. So when I was reflecting on this, parang I was thinking, ano ba yung use ng math, for example, statistics, ganyan, sa social sciences, in tackling very, very complex problems? I think what you have to remember is math is abstraction, diba? Para kang ini-ignore mo yung individuality ng tao or whatever, tapos you're abstracting right? Instead of looking at individuals and their rich experiences, you deal with numbers. And especially when it comes to solving problems, policy making, ganyan, you realize you lose something, diba? That's why you never forget to begin your any analysis with the experience and perspective of your problem owners. Remember kanina we started with pictures. I asked you about your experience. That's where you start. But with math, with statistics, ganyan, when you abstract, you also gain a number of things. The ability to compare, right? Remember we compared budgets ng public transport to roads in general, no? Buses, jeeps, etc. to rail, ganyan. You gain the ability to understand reality and problems more objectively. Of course, may bias sa data, etc. And if you have statistics classes, please do take them seriously. You guys have stat ba? Everyone has stat. That's really nice. I have a recommended book on stat. It's very, very friendly. I like it so much. And to develop solutions that will help address problems at their roots, right? So may pag-asa ba yung traffic or mobility problem sa Philippines? I think so. Diba? Yun. Okay, so next steps. No? This is my last slide na. For more resources, if you're interested in mobility advocacy, visit moveas1ph.org and socials na Moveas1. I think there's also Alliance.org. Tama ba? Anyone here part of Blue Mob? Hindi pa. Familiar pa kayo doon? Wala pang Rec Week. So there's I think there's Alliance.org that actually into the mobility advocacy. I think it's called Blue Mob. Medyo bago pa sila. If you're interested in statistics, wow. So read The Art of Statistics by David Spiegelhall. I don't know how to pronounce his name. But it's really cool, right? As in parang siya, parang Idiot's Guide to Stat. Tapos puro kwento siya kasi yun yung work niya eh. 'Di ba? For example, may one of the cases that he talks about is he was asked by a court to check if the police could have caught a serial killer earlier, mga ganyang shit. Hello? Okay. Oops, sorry. Yan. Next, be informed and get involved. No? So you contact me on Facebook, IG, LinkedIn, ganyan. Do you still use Facebook? Okay, cool. Okay, I don't feel so old. Yan. So katipunan traffic is something that si Miss Byrne, the chairperson ng Ateneo, is also a board member of WeSolve, where Daniel and I are working, and we're supporting Moveas1. She's interested about this traffic situation. We have a program called the Young Mobility Leaders Program. No, it's in its fourth parang batch na, like just go on Moveas1 socials. And then for your projects, papers, and thesis, take on mobility. No? Kasi it's you can do a paper or whatever na like gets you a grade, pero it's very different. It's a very different experience to grapple with a problem that a lot of people face. And if you need help sa data, ganyan, we have a data bank that's online, ganyan, so just reach out lang. And I heard you guys have a proposed assessment or paper or something after this. This is my suggestion. I hope your profs let you do this. Number one, commute kayo to school, no? Or for the majority of you who are living nearby, commute somewhere else. Do it with your friends, diba? Para fun. Punta kayong mall or something. Hello? Don't start planning now. Plan later, okay? Second, record your commute using the format that I made, no? Ito. Ay, sorry. Yan, ganyan. Yeah? You can actually add columns pa dyan. I just put time here. You can put cost, you can put distance, diba? Just use Google Maps. You guys are so, like, resourceful naman kayo. No? And then, like, reflect on it. Diba? Like, I don't know, write a paragraph or something. Like, see what you noticed from that. And yeah. So yun, thank you everyone. Thanks for your attention and for your time.
How insightful. Thank you, Mr. Lionel Tangangco, for that wonderful talk. The talk, Math and Traffic and Transport, further reveals the intrinsic versatility of the art of Mathematica. We can translate virtually any problem into this profound language of mysterious symbols and intricate theorems, including problems that seem too complex, like traffic and transport.
And if we have enough skill, creativity, bravery to step into the dark, and maybe just a bit of hex, we can solve any translated problem like magic.
Joseph, I really like how this talk emphasizes how math makes the invisible visible, especially on our day-to-day functionings like transport.
And as a commuter myself, I find it deeply satisfying to hear directly from Mr. Lionel that there's still hope in mitigating the Metro Manila traffic.
Speaking of translating real-life problems to mathematics, this brings us to our fourth and final sorcerer, who will introduce the magic of turning physical and real-life problems into mathematical ones. So let us see what they have in store for us.
We call on Mr. DJ Benito to formally introduce to us the final speaker for this event, who will make the world of mathematical modeling more familiar.
Hello. So our last speaker for today is Mr. David Coanco. He currently works as a finance business partner, business analytics associate in Lazada, where he worked on various data projects such as financial data streamlining, Lazada policy analytics, campaign performance forecasting, and many more. Prior to Lazada, he also worked as a data science specialist in Business Mind Philippines and as a developer in Augmented Intelligence Pros Incorporated. He holds a master's in applied mathematics with specialization in mathematical finance from Ateneo de Manila University, where he graduated as cum laude and program awardee. In his undergraduate years, he also won first place in various competitions, such as the annual nationwide search for Math Wizard, Associate for Computer Machinery's Agro-Olympics, and UP's annual statistics. Everyone, let's welcome Mr. David Coanco.
Hello. So, hello everyone. It's already 6 p.m. So, I will promise that I won't have a lot of numbers for you guys. This is just more of a framework slide. And, hello. So yeah, there are not a lot of slides, there are not a lot of numbers, so you guys won't be scared, confused, because this is just more of a framework, and I just want to point out stuff that you see in your daily lives that you might not be noticing, or you might not be appreciating enough. So to start, Okay, so quick rundown on who I am. So if you can see there, if you can ignore the giant mascot in the back, so you can tell where I already work. So I am a mathematician in my heart, and I love math, and I've been competing in math since college. But when I work, I don't call myself a mathematician because that doesn't sell as much. Data science is still a big industry, and that's what I use as my job title. So in the three industries I've worked in, are dealing with different various aspects of work problems. So the first industry was dealing with BPOs, BPO operations, and it was a startup, so we had to do everything by scratch. The second one was dealing with media data under ABS-CBN. And lastly, I'm still doing a lot of work in e-commerce. through a lot of different finance projects, a lot of operations projects, and you guys see the benefit if you use Lazada. So quick question, who here has online shopped before? Okay, who here has shopped online during the pandemic? Oh, hey, good number. So the fact that you guys were able to have a good experience, hopefully good experience online when it was still a pandemic was partly because we helped make it easier for everyone. So my old role, and I'll talk about that more because the finance numbers are obviously sensitive. I'm going to talk about how we were able to create policies to help sellers and how to help drivers help them make it a more efficient process so that you guys have better operations, better packages, and everything arrives on time. So the thing is, here, question. BPOs, media, and e-commerce. What do they have in common? Anyone have a guess? Nothing. So honestly, when I jump into each industry, I start out scratch. Well, mostly scratch because a lot of the times, the stuff you learn on the go are really stuff you learn when you're immersed into the industry. But the thing behind everything might be a little more sensible if I explain it in a few stories. So first story, BPO employment. So my first job outside Ateneo was improving BPO operations, not BPI. And my biggest project was to help retrain employees so that they would be able to apply for new jobs internally. So generally, once you're employed, a thing that employers won't tell you is that it's cheaper to usually just rehire employees rather than look for new ones. Because syempre, they're always taking a risk if you don't know where you're going to get your employees from. Rather, they just like to keep as much employees as possible, train them so that they're fit for the job. And that's when we can have employee security. So the employees have a job, they have money, they have an income stream, and also the employers don't have to risk losing or risking their operations. So the thing here is though, it has a few problems. So number one, employees have different levels of proficiency. So syempre, some employees might be good at speaking English, they might be good at calculating numbers, but the new position needs someone who's good at speaking French. So there's a mismatch. Next, they're sufficient for their current job, obviously, but they might not be sufficient for their next job. And also, jobs are periodic, meaning if you're in the BPO industry, sometimes you'll have jobs that will only last for maybe 6 months because that's how long the operation lasts. But at least they have a job for 6 months. That's the mindset. But the thing is, the company also provides internal courses so that employees can upskill while they're there. This is the thing we use to help create programs so that employees will be able to find their next job in the company. But yeah, the ultimate goal was to maintain and retain the number of employees since it's cheaper than looking for more employees outside. So in short, you have your employees, you have your courses, and you have your jobs. The thing is though, you can't really connect them unless you add statistics. Sorry. How do I fix this? So you add stats, and then you can eventually see, after seeing all the courses and all the stats, you can come up with a strategy. Oops. So you can come up with a strategy so that they would be able to get their new jobs. So what we were able to do as a team, we were able to gamify the different courses, the different stats of each employee, and the different job requirements into numbers. And we were able to create a recommendation system based on the numbers so that we could have a personalization of each employee's desired job. So first, the important thing is we aligned with the company. So we had to make sure the company was okay with us assigning numbers to each and every single aspect of their company. And they agreed naman. So for each employee, for each course, and for each job, we assigned different numbers. So example, math and English, we gave a different score. And second, we were able to create a recommendation algorithm. So think Netflix, but more personalized what you need to follow next. So unlike Netflix where you can choose to ignore the next shows, this one you have to really follow your course by course. That gets you from A, their current proficiency, to B, the desired job's minimum requirements. The end result was, for the most part, employees were provided with personal courses that got them their new jobs. So that was the first story. And the second story now, we jump to media. So media, when I talk about media, ABS-CBN. As a data scientist under ABS-CBN's project, we analyzed their articles so that we were able to generate topics, generate highlights, and try to connect everything together for ABS-CBN. Because who here would want to have a summarized version of all their readings? Who wants to have a summarized version of all their articles and just have to read a single outline? Who would want that instead of reading the entire 20 to 30 pages per reading? So yan, if you can code something like this, perfect, right? You don't have to even go to school now. So yeah, we had to extract relevant information such as geolocation because sometimes news happens to different places and we want to know the first piece of information we usually ask when it's an event is where. The topic genre. So sometimes we're not interested in entertainment, we're in sports or politics or opinion pieces. We need to know if they're from there. And lastly, we want to connect topics together so that they have a web of ideas. So example, if we find news in Davao, we know Davao is part of Mindanao, and Mindanao is part of the overall Philippines. So when we try to create idea maps, we can see how they're all connected from one another. So using all the articles, we use the topics generated to create a hierarchy of data or to connect the keywords with one another. So in short, this is what we kind of did. We analyzed a million of articles, and this was basically what we did. I ain't reading all of that, so I'm happy for you, or sorry if that happened. So we turned all of this, one giant large text, which I just made sample text lang. So we turned all of this into something simple. So from roughly around 1 billion words we processed, we got a list of topics with a list of subtopics and even a sub-subtopics, but that doesn't make the diagram look nice. So media data. We created a hierarchy model that looks at all the topics together, and we had to use a lot of processing tools as our strategy. So for non-mathematicians here, you can actually do math on words. Who knew? So we did basic TF-IDF. That's an algorithm that helps you determine the most important words in a phrase or a paragraph. And we also did a modified hierarchy word model that accepts words in Filipino and English. Because a lot of online data and online research is solely limited to English processing. So we had to create different models to fit in Filipino language, Taglish, and English all into one single model. So the result is, even if it doesn't mention keywords, so example, an earthquake happens in Davao, we can extract that the information happened in Mindanao because it doesn't mention, if it doesn't mention Davao, if it doesn't mention Mindanao, we can still use the network model and the web to find out where exactly it happened. So the fun fact here is that if you're a data scientist and you're doing word processing, roughly 80% of your time is just cleaning the data. We have to remove a lot of the filler words like is, ano, ito. So that would leave us with a lot of the important words left. The model itself took a couple of days to set up because there were a lot of extra cleaning we had to do during the model development itself. So here we were able to develop a framework to get a model or a list of topics that we can use for future articles in ABS-CBN. And lastly, my last story is about policy making during pandemics. So I joined Lazada in 2020, peak pandemic, right after ABS-CBN shut down. As a policy and strategy analytics associate, I was in charge of being the policy person of the company. So I had to know all the seller policies. I had to know all the different strategies that we're doing to help sellers improve their metrics. Also, at the same time, what's under seller jurisdiction and what's customer rights. So during the pandemic, though, one of the biggest problems we had as a company was that sellers had new behaviors in the pandemic because obviously we all changed during the pandemic. One of the most important behaviors we kind of noticed that was a big issue was that sellers would tag their orders as fulfilled, but then when they do have their orders picked up, biglang the seller would say, I'm still packing it, or I don't have it on hand yet. So what happens is they don't get charged because sellers don't get charged for trips, but we do waste logistics expenses just trying to pick up the sellers. So question, who here in their Lazada or Shopee app has seen that their order has been ready to pack for the longest time but nothing happened? Like who's seen their packages stuck in ready to ship for like 2 or 3 days? Okay, that usually means either 1, logistics might be having a hard time, or 2, sellers might be packing it wrong. So again, we want, as a policy person, we want to avoid this kind of behavior. So we kind of made rules, we kind of made implementations, and we wanted to make sure that sellers knew that this wasn't a good move. So we also wanted to assess the damage done to logistics expenses because, syempre, if they travel to you, they don't have anything to pick up, and they travel back, that's just a waste of money. But the thing is, we couldn't do this directly. During the pandemic, employees weren't allowed to be in direct contact with the sellers for safety reasons. For my first 2 years in Lazada, I was actually just working from home, working in the comfort of my own 4 walls. So I didn't even get to see the actual situation until 2022. So what did we do? So first, we looked at the logistics operations. We summarized the data. We made inferences based on that data. And then we made policies on that based on the different logistics outputs. The thing is, though, this was under a huge assumption that logistics data is super correlated to the seller data because we don't have direct seller data. We didn't know, we had to make a big assumption that poor seller performance was tied to poor logistics performance. That also had to mean that we assumed that logistics were acting perfectly, but that's another factor we had to consider when we were doing our operations mismo. We made sure that the models determined the likelihood of a seller also being likely to not tell the truth by packing orders but not really. And so we made strategies in order to help cut down wrong behavior. So the end goal was from the start of September 2022 to somewhere around December 2021, we saw a 90% reduction in wasted logistics operations. So if we're talking about billions, then we probably saved hundreds of millions in pesos when talking about logistics operations expenses, at least. And when we mean expenses, at least they're being used properly. So also, sellers are now fulfilling faster. Who've noticed that at least compared to pandemic, sellers fulfill much faster. Like who sometimes gets their orders 1 to 2 days right after their order. So some of you, that's good because we're still trying to push for faster fulfillment pa. And at least this is one of the bottlenecks where we can't guarantee the faster performance, at least until now. So those 3 stories all tell a similar tale. Everything was much easier once we made a math model or we developed at least numbers into our problems. All of the problems had mathematical states, all problems had end goals, and all problems, most importantly, had strategies getting there. Meaning, what's the point if we can know someone's stats? What's the point if we know someone's job requirements? What's the point of knowing the initial text and the end goal if we don't have ways of getting there, right? It's like who here, like, it's weird kasi if you're, example, you're a student with an 80 and your goal is 100, but there are no more exams left to take. What's the strategy to get an A? Nothing, diba? So, in short, they're all states that are easy to measure. You can see different employee stats, different clean texts, different logistics data, and we want to turn all of those into minimum job stats, organized topics, and seller data. So our strategy here was from us making recommendation systems, us making policies, and us doing different word processing algorithms so that at least all of us have one way to get from the start to the end goal. So mathematical models, in short, show the relationships between one another and let you look at the bigger picture. It lets you move from the what, so what's your problem, to the how. How can I solve this problem? Because at least in this way of thinking, you're not stuck in the what's good or bad. It's more of how can I move from this to that. So the thing is, you're not math majors, you're not employees yet. Why is it important for you guys, right? So you the guys don't have KPIs yet, unlike most employees here, which as you can see from the previous talk, sometimes KPIs aren't accurate or they're not helpful. So why does it matter? They're everywhere. The thing is, mathematical models and numbers, even if you don't think about it, have existed way before you were born. You've been thrust into this ever since the start of your life. And the thing is, even if you don't like it, they make things sensible. So for example, for school, what's a number model that you can think of right away? Grades. Because you have your exams, you have your grades, and at least it makes your school life measurable. Next, value of goods. What's your number model for value of goods? Money. Money and prices help you determine what's valuable and what's not. Next, health. For health, what are numbers you see when you think about health? Okay, so there are lots of examples such as medical numbers, nutritional facts, BMI, and all of these help you it also all makes things easier to understand. Because sometimes you just want to see if you're healthy or not, if you want to fit a certain way of, if you hit certain targets. Syempre, you don't want to have high blood rates because that's bad. Or you don't want to be extremely obese because that's not healthy. So more than that, they're everywhere, they're helpful. The thing about math models is that they give you two pieces of information right away. Where you are and where you want to go. And connecting the two, you have strategies. You have benchmarks and you have a direction. So here's a math question. What do you call the thing in mathematics that has both direction and magnitude? Tama, vector. Yun, good. Okay, so you have a vector. So you have benchmarks and directions in your journey, and knowing where you are progress-wise lets you compare and lets you see all your efforts into a single piece of information. That's helpful. Instead of thinking about everything, it kind of just makes everything smaller. So example, you want money. You have an end goal of money. You want an end goal to be rich. You have to think of a strategy to make more money. You want to be healthy. You have a target BMI. You have a target goal. You have a target weight to hit. And you have the different strategies of workouts or diets that you can come up with so that you can get there. And you can track your weight and the progress. And lastly, all of you guys are trying to graduate and you know your current grades. So you need to come up with a strategy to either get better grades or get better at studying. But the thing is, math models aren't everything. So one of the things that I would like to point out is that while these make everything easier, they're not going to give a complete picture. Numbers will always guide, but they will never capture the full experience. Because how can you capture, how do you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? That doesn't make sense, diba? Because you can't measure happiness. Grades will never capture the journey or knowledge. So question, who here feels like they deserve the higher grade for all their efforts but didn't get it? Konti lang pala. Everyone deserved their grades, ah. Next, courses don't translate to job requirements. So sometimes, no matter how hard you study, no matter how proficient your skills are, that doesn't necessarily translate to getting a job outside in the world. There are other skills that you need to develop. And also, topics don't capture a whole article. So, syempre, when you look at the summary, you will lose all the nuances that come with the original text. And metrics will never capture the full e-commerce experience. So obviously, numbers will just make your package, tracking your package makes it easy, but you don't know what each part of the journey is. Like you don't know what the seller's going through, you don't know what the driver's going through, you don't know what the sorting center is going through, you don't know what the guy that texts you, nandito na po yung order nyo, is going through. And obviously, health is also never going to be fully measured by numbers. So BMI, body fat percentage, they're all not going to give you a perfect screenshot of what you're going to do to be healthy, and that's all up on you. And the last thing is, it's not everything because it's not human. Numbers are not the thing that everything is reduced to. It's an experience. Like what Lai pointed out, it always has to come and end with the experience. So in short, I don't like this, in case you didn't want to hear any of that, with this, math models will always define parts of our lives. Whether you like it or not, you'll always have to encounter numbers. At least in my different industries, I at least showed that you can always introduce it, you can always think of it as a framework to solve problems, and it always will make life easier in one way or another. So the thing is, you guys don't have to make the models, I do, but at least you will have to participate in them. Models are designed to ultimately elicit action. So what's the point of the start and end goals if you don't have anything there? So example, you want to see, if you want to be rich as a goal, but you're not doing anything to get there, what are you doing? Also, it's also important to understand that math models are a guide. So whenever we made these models, we always made sure that there was leeway for adjustments. Syempre, when we see that sellers had issues with COVID, even though they had poor metrics, we didn't penalize them because that's not human. Also, if sellers had different issues such as raids or supply issues, that's on a case-to-case basis. We don't treat everything as black and white. The most important aspect of mathematical model making is the journey. You can't measure the emotions, the hardships, the triumphs, and the successes that you encounter just with numbers. Syempre, a 100 in a math long test is nice, but it doesn't measure up to the fact that at least you studied for it, you felt good, you were the first one to submit the long test before everyone else. And lastly, what makes math invisible, what makes the invisible visible is that it sorts out the chaos of every day. So you don't have to process everything all at once. You process a simplified version of it, but that allows you to understand that there's something deeper behind it. So thank you, and hope you guys pay attention more to all the numbers in your life.
Thank you very much to our speakers. Now we're opening the floor for question and answers. For those who need to leave, please leave quietly. And I hope yung mga alis lang ay dahil may class kayo at 6:30. Okay, any questions for our speakers? We'll have a quick Q&A lang. Again, for those leaving, please leave quietly. Thank you. For those who are shy to share their answers using the microphones, you can uh, access this link. Sige. Any questions from the on-site audience? Yes?
For the first speaker, I forgot the name.
Lionel.
Um, I was thinking like a main reason why I wouldn't, or like my parents wouldn't let me use public transport is because, um, say LRT, safety reasons, a lot like pickpocketing, or like I heard from, there was someone in my school, I think they got stalked while on the LRT, so parang it was like really scary. So, and as well as the Philippine weather, I feel like that's a big distinction in comparison to other countries. Like, say Japan or in Europe, their weather's a lot more temperate, so the weather's cooler, and they don't have as much rain as we do, like typhoon, like it'll just be a drizzle. So, especially here, like the weather would play a really big factor into getting people to bike. Like, who wants to bike in the rain? Who wants to walk in the rain? Even if you made bus stations for that, there wouldn't be a roof everywhere, so people still wouldn't want to use the bus or something like that, or to bike. So, how would you get, knowing that the Philippines, like the climate is like this, and the general like safety issues, those were factors that you didn't like talk about here. I'm just wondering if like you have some kind of idea about how you would address those.
Two things, no? Ay, okay lang. Pwede na. Ayan. Two things, right? Safety, security, no? That side of safety and the weather. I'll tackle the weather first. Has anyone here, no, or yourself, have you been in the parking lot of a mall recently?
Very hot.
Very hot,
Because of the
diba?
cars and the gas.
You don't have the sun there, right?
Yeah.
But it's very hot. So that is actually called the urban heat island effect. Because of our congestion, yung buildings natin, yung mga sasakyan natin stuck in traffic, a lot of the heat you feel is actually from that. When you walk sa Som Forest, it's not hot naman eh. Diba? Kahit maaraw, maglakad ka dyan, hindi masyado mainit kasi you have shade. Diba? So part siya ng transport and land use planning and all that, na you take into account these things para hindi tumaas yung temperatures mo. Konting shade lang makes a lot of difference sa heat. So I'm sure there are studies out there, I just don't know them yet. Pero that's you might want to Google that, urban heat island effect. Sa safety, security, yeah, it's something we have to work on, no? But the thing kasi is, if we don't shift people from private car use to public transport, nothing's gonna be viable. Like, car use isn't viable anymore. Like, kaya nagre-rent kayo dito, diba? I mean, a lot of people are renting here. Because it's not viable either anymore. So, kailangan part siya ng investments in transport, right? You're right, kasi you look at it from the commuter experience, right? Kasi the commuter doesn't just experience times. The commuter also feels fear, diba? Maraming dyan eh. You might want to look at walkability indices, right? So globally, maraming mga indices dyan that measure walkability. Even increasingly, no, being more progressive. No, what walkability is different for a woman and a man. Diba? You feeling more of safety. Diba? Yung mga tambay, ganyan. So, yun. Good points. Thank you. Yeah. But no, these are things that can be addressed.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you. Another question from the audience. No other questions from the online. Yes.
I have one question. So I'm in AB Communications, and I always hear from my blockmates and my course mates that they went to AB Com to really avoid math. But from what I heard today, like with journalism or math and analyzing data is really needed in communication fields. How would you, I guess, expound that math is really related in in my course, which is AB Communications?
Okay, so thank you for that question. At the very least, you can rest assured that you're not going to be the one crunching the numbers. But you do have to understand that there are you'll also have to see online trends. You'll have to see, especially when you're in the media, it's more than just numbers. You'll also have to see the non-mathematical side behind it. It just so happens that my part of the work in the media was more on making life simpler for everyone in that this numbers, we've used numbers to help everything summarize faster. So you guys will be the ones making the articles, we will be the ones writing the contents, or at least helping the prod teams make everything happen. But for us, for mathematicians, we don't see a number behind, we don't see numbers behind the displays, the programs, but those are also equally important as well.
Hello, I'll add something. Sorry, what's your name?
Jill.
Jill, yun, Jill. So actually, a big part of my work in government was communication. Specifically reform communication, advocacy communication. So we had reforms, like the train law. Nung kasagsagan ng pandemic, I was actually assigned to DOH for 3 weeks. Like yung mga daily press con ni Yusek Vergere, if you remember her, we were writing her statements. And what was my job then? My job was actually to look at the analytics, not as hindi as sophisticated as Sina David were doing. Was to look at the analytics and say, where's the conversation on COVID now? And what should the DOH say in order to not scare people into staying home? At that time, that was the issue. But empower people to decide for themselves that they want to stay home. And a lot of that is actually metrics. So my suggestion, if you tell your friends, is embrace it. Just embrace it. It's gonna make you a much better communicator. Yeah? Kasi that's what we did. Yung ginawa ni David na parang may articles to summarize, we actually had a physics intern who did that for us in the DOF. Na ginawa nila yun na all mentions of DOF, etc. And we'd have weekly content editorial meetings. That's the future. I mean, it's the future of communication even. Maybe there's a lot of fear, but when you get used to it, you'll realize there's nothing much to diba? To ganyan. And you don't have to do the numbers. Sina David will do the numbers. I just use them too.
But yeah, just to end things, I think the fear is more on coming from processing the numbers, but once you receive the numbers themselves, I think that's on a capability that you're already comfortable with, because you're not going to be the ones doing advanced formulas. You'll just be reporting and understanding the numbers. So, example, you know that 20,000 is a lot. 20,000 can be a lot or a little depending on the context, and that's where communication majors help make that idea important or not.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to our audience and to our speakers. May we call on the host to help close the program? Sige, last question.
Hello po, sirs. Sorry, last question. It's actually for both Sir Lionel and Sir David. Because I've been looking into statistics, specifically in mobility as well in a previous project. So, and we've been using mathematical models for it. So my question is actually, how do we know that we're looking at the right variables to create models for? Like, how do we know that we're actually creating an accurate representation of the situation and we're not twisting it using, like, what was mentioned by Sir Lionel, focusing on the wrong variables, which creates a false sense of security in the solutions that we're forming?
Okay. Ang training ko kasi is sa economics And usually, someone out there has come up with some theory. Right? That's economist. Someone somewhere made some theory. Or some other country did it first. And there are critiques of those papers and stuff. So ako personally, that's what I do. Does it make sense na ito yung variables na nilagay niya, na tinatry nang i-relate to each other? But for me, just don't forget experience. Diba? Talk to your problem owners always. Always talaga. Kasi yun yung reality diba? Mag-model ka lang diba? Gumagawa ka lang ng parang caricature ng nangyayari talaga So yun. Medyo useless, no? Pero yun yung ginagawa ko.
Pero yeah, to expound on what also Lai said, you have to remember that the models you're making are supposed to be capturing the experience, not the other way around. Now you're trying to make the experience into like a formula or whatever. And you also have to be wary that the variables you're choosing, you might be overthinking it. Sometimes you might have a very hard problem and you want to put a lot of variables when it would be much easier and much more helpful rather, to just focus on a smaller problem, limit your variables, and try to solve that one first. Whether or not it's important, that's up to the back. That goes back to the experience. So, example, Lionel wanted to focus more on transit time or waiting time or or travel time. You can pick all of the three and try to solve each individually, but what you pick and what you solve first is also a matter of experience and priorities.
Thank you po so much.
Thank you very much again to our speakers. So to close our program, we call on our host. Thank you.
All right, it looks like this is all the time we have for now. Thank you again, Mr. Joshua Oyheng, our second speaker in the first session, Mr. Lionel Tanganco, and Mr. David Kuangco for your wonderful responses. Let me now call on Trisha, one of the MathCon project heads, to present the certificates of appreciation for our speakers.
We award the Certificate of Appreciation to Lionel Tanganco for sharing his expertise as a speaker in MathCon 2023 Revelare, given this 22nd day of August 2023. This certificate is signed by the two of us, project heads, as well as the AMS Top 5. And we also present a certificate of appreciation to David Kojunko for sharing his expertise as a speaker in MathCon 2023 Revelare.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you Mr. Tanganco and Mr. Kuangco for your wonderful talks and responses.
Again, we remind everyone to fill up the evaluation form flashed on the screen at link.ateneomathsociety.org/mathcon2324 evals form. Thank you.
Now that you young equationists have collected knowledge from master sorcerers and triumphed over the shadow, you have successfully traversed the Revelare labyrinth.
However, we, the Matrix Magi, have to admit something to you. The shadow is simply an orchestration of ours. We wanted you to let your curiosities and doubts grow.
The shadow's ultimate motivation is revealed: to challenge the participants' beliefs, foster a deeper understanding of the true essence of magic, and encourage thinking outside the box.
The shadow, a manifestation of doubt, serves as a catalyst for their growth, guiding you towards a more profound connection with our magical abilities. Magic is best used in the dark when an equationist is faced with uncertainty. There's no formulaic, traditional way to magic.
We, the Matrix Magi, want you to enter the dark doorways of the labyrinth, knowing that each dead end is a mark of progress.
And that concludes the talks for tonight. We hope that you learned plenty from the wide range of topics presented by our talented speakers.
Before we leave, we would like to give some final reminders. Kindly ensure that you fill up the evaluation form at link.ateneomathsociety.org/mathcon2324 evals form, as this will complete your attendance.
And before we officially end our event, let us call on Mr. Miguel Yapan, the current AMS President, to deliver the closing remarks.
Hi. Hello. So, konti na lang tayo. I'll make this quick. So, as we draw on the curtains on MathCon 2023 Revelare, I would like to extend my gratitude to our dear speakers for sharing how they intertwine mathematics to our daily lives. From symmetry and modeling to transportation and online conflicts, mathematics is the backbone of many ideas and concepts that we interact with in our everyday struggle, everyday life. I hope that as amazing as these concepts are, we also get to reflect on how mathematics makes waves in our society. Let this event serve as a reminder that mathematics is not caged in our classrooms. Make use of the interdisciplinary nature of math to further hone the skills that you have in your respective fields. I would also like to give special thanks to the mathematics department, the Department of Mathematics, and our student volunteers for making this event possible. And of course, I would also like to thank all of those who stayed. And as you leave Leong Hall later, remember to stay curious and open your eyes to make the invisible visible. That's it, and thank you very much.
Finally, to commemorate this magical gathering of equationists, we have our picture taking. For everyone in the venue, we encourage you to smile or pose while we take your picture. For Zoom participants, please be patient while you are striking your pose as there are multiple pages. Everyone, please go near.
Hello? Oh. Okay. Okay, let's try to go on the stage. Since kasha naman tayo lahat sa stage, let's try to take a picture on the stage. So, pwede naman dito sa floor, like maybe one row for those who are vertically challenged like me. Or those who are not able to go upstairs like me. Alright, okay, those on my right here, you can also go on stage. Ayun, you can kneel down a bit also. Yan. May space pa sa likod, guys. Also, we can compress. Guys, let's compress. Ayan, for those who are vertically challenged like me, there's space in the front. For those who cannot go upstairs, like me, we can stay in the front. Yeah. Ayun, kita ba sila dito sa baba? Ayun. For those on the left side of the stage towards the exit, can you please compress a bit more? Compress a bit. Oh. Wait, mamaya yung pagkain. That's not for everybody, just saying. Wait lang. There's still space here. Caitlin, there's still space here. Required. Ano ba? Yeah. Can some people from like that area move to this side? Here. That's okay, cool. Oh yeah. Ano ba? Okay ba? Okay. More people. Maybe like 3 people. Sige. 3, 1. Okay, next person. 2, Pat. Okay. You with the black eyelace. Is that black? I don't know. Here, you can move here, behind there. Yes. Okay ba? Okay na? Okay na yan? Okay, where do I go? Stop. One, two, three, plus 5. Jump shot daw. De, joke lang. Wait, I can't do that.
Wait, we're